Africa's updated its priorities in some level, hopefully along the same line as always has been. I think we've tried to be the leading USG support for a just and inclusive energy transition since day one. So since 2013, almost 10 years now, we've probably helped just about 145 million people get new connections and mobilized over $61 billion in resources. And that's always been with that goal of trying to make sure it's a just and inclusive transition. While the numbers, I think, our number of projects to date, by number of projects, has always been around 80% renewable, we're even increasing that. And I would say we're basically full on a clean energy program at this point. So that has been a pivot in some levels, definitely in the way we're trying to look at it. Not only is it the right thing to do, and a big part of the Biden-Harris administration's priorities, is also where the market's going. We see costs of solar coming down dramatically over time. We always try to follow the market, but maybe more importantly, follow the market trends and then accelerate the market itself. Because everything we do is meant to be catalyzing the private sector. At the end of the day, the resources needed are so gargantuan. In fact, I was on a panel earlier today with the number of $1.6 trillion needed. That's mind-blowing. We have to do things new. We have to think of new innovative ways of doing it. And I would say that's maybe where we're continuing to pivot, but I've always tried to be on that trajectory. We need more investment. You know, and back in the 2021 Global Landscape of Climate Finance did a review and looked back at 2019, 2020, and there was $632 billion of committed climate finance. Only 3% of that made to sub-Saharan Africa, and only 0.03% of that was from the private sector. There's no way with that 1.6 trillion I mentioned, and again, don't quote me on that one, that was something I heard at a panel earlier today. But my point is that the magnitude is so gigantic that business as usual is just not going to work. That 580 million people is probably more like 600 million now who don't have access to power at all in sub-Saharan Africa, 100,000 health clinics. We have to change the way we do business. So, and it needs capital. So, well, I guess the one point I'd be making is we're going to continue to try to figure out a way to find that capital and bring it into the area. Some of that will be on technical assistance, and I think we always try to be a smart subsidy in that respect. Anything we do is a subsidy to a market structure, of course, but it has to catalyze other resources and then unlock other people's and lower the risk, which is the problem, right? The risk is just overly stated for sub-Saharan Africa. In some ways, of course you get it, and money will go when the risk is bought down. But I think we've shown that with different kind of tools, what we've done already, and maybe a change of the paradigm altogether, looking at decentralized renewable energy, looking at new ways of utility structures, looking at different technologies, battery storage, for instance, when that comes online in longer durations and at cheaper prices, we can kind of change the way we look at it. And I expect that risk to come way, way, way down, right? I do think it's a bit out of line in terms of what the actual risk is, but you got to price that risk out in different ways. And I think how we've been doing it heretofore is one way. We need to think of new ways. I think a couple things have to happen. I think, first of all, I mentioned before that there's some key areas that will be needed to unlock, I think, renewable energy development. One of which is transmission. You're probably aware that there's more transmission lines in Brazil than there is in all sub-Saharan Africa, which kind of, again, gives you the scope of the problem, which is crazy, right? But in order to get to some of those areas where the renewables are best, we're going to have better transmission lines, and they're probably going to have to be privately financed on some level, like the level of mostly. We need new models because that has been a massive obstacle and a massive challenge for sub-Saharan Africa since the beginning. Two would be, I think, battery storage. As we see longer durations, I mentioned, as we see cheaper prices, battery packs have come down 90% from 2010 to 2020. I think we'll be able to see not only on the grid itself to unlock those intermittent sources, but also decentralized. And I think that's another big way we need to look at it. I think the idea of moving and getting bankable projects has to be thought of not just the bankable grid projects, which I think is a more standard way. This is not an either or, by the way. These both have to happen. We need more bankable grid projects. We need to continue to figure out a way to reduce the cost of the stack, or at least alleviate and ameliorate the risk of what people see in the capital stack for grid projects. But we also need to figure out a way to get money into the distributed renewable side of the equation, right? I think we used to call it on and off grid, and we're not using those terms so much anymore because those are and should be morphing into there's power sources and people who need power, and you figure out how to get there. And I think it will be a combination thereof. I don't think it has to be the same way we developed in the US or in Europe over time. In fact, we probably shouldn't be rewriting the rules that we used 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago and trying to write them here in Africa. Africa is innovating on itself. There's fantastically interesting models going out there. Despite the fact that maybe 50% of people who don't have power could get power through a distributed renewable way, only 2% of the financing is going there. So again, a mismatch on the models we're using. We're only betting on one horse. We need to be betting on all the horses to some extent. So it's a little bit of playing the entire market and watching the market go up instead of trying to pick just the winners. The same token, to do that, a lot of things have to kind of go into what's needed to make that a more or a less risky environment and more to support more investment capital. You need transparent legal and regulatory frameworks. You need sound strategic and integrated power sector planning. And again, if you're thinking of new models, like it's not how it used to be, you need to plan that out, right? You need clear and transparent procurement processes. We know that from day one that you will attract more investment. Money likes predictability. We need to make it predictable. You need utility and electricity tariff reform. So again, you need to figure out how to price power better and how to manage and operate it better. And I think we're there to try to help that as well. You strengthen environmental, social standards and gender equality standards. So you need to figure out how to crowd more inclusive voices, not only in the provision of the power, but in the receiving of power as well. The more minds, the better here for sure. And it needs to be in a way that's sustainable over time. And you need strengthened national and regional power pools, right? So at the end of the day, this is not going to be solved just at a country by country level, though that's an important input point. You need to be able to let the power flow, especially if there's resources that help ameliorate a renewable intermittent problem somewhere else, right? So if you can bring solar on a certain time and hydro as a base load here and there, you could have a clean solution, but power needs to move across the power pools. So, we're proud, I think, of trying to be on the forefront of this stuff. We supported the first battery storage grid solution in Malawi, in Golamodi, a 20 megawatt solar site with a 5 megawatt co-located battery, the first one in Africa. Solutions like that have to happen more and more often, not be the exception, but the norm, and they will be. I think at the end of the day, when we see things like the Just Energy Transition Partnership, when everyone's committed to making a just, equitable transition, it's still going to be challenging, it's still going to be hard, but I think if we think of new models and continue to push the innovation in both process and in addition to actual technology, we'll get there.